From the exciting possibility of Brian O'Connor's return in both Fast 10 and 11, to the challenge of honoring Paul Walker's legacy without ruining Fast 7's perfect ending, here's how Fast 10 will change everything as the franchise comes to an end. And I'm kicking it off with the official trailer teasing a flashback sequence with Dom and Brian. No, not the new one that teased Fast 10's storyline in more detail, but the one that dropped on YouTube back in February. There's a lot going on in there, what with the introduction of Jason Momoa's and setting up the stakes for each member of Dom's family. But right around the 40-second mark, there's a flashback sequence from Fast 5, when Dom and Brian prepare to rip the vault from the police station. Now, here's where things get interesting. Apparently, Dante is Hernan Reyes' son and was there when the two killed his father. So wait, is Fast 10 basically going to be Dom's family versus Dante's family? Who knows? But the real reason why that flashback's so important is because the trailer doesn't tell you the full story. You get a brief glimpse of Dom and Brian slamming the vault into the car that Dante was driving, and he falls from the bridge straight into the ocean below. He survived, obviously, but is that all we're getting for his backstory? I'm pretty sure that if Fast 10 uses shots from Fast 5, then the movie's going to use archive footage too. So anything that didn't make it into Fast 5's theatrical cut could be reused in Fast 10, and that includes scenes featuring Paul Walker. Now, I'd say that's the ideal way to bring back the actor in a limited capacity. It wouldn't interfere too much with Fast 10's plot, and the fans would catch a welcome glimpse of Walker at the beginning of the movie. But what about the tease at the end of Fast 9? So, a brief recap from the last few minutes of that movie. There's a moment where Dom pauses before saying grace and notes that there's one empty chair on the table. That's when Mia tells him that he's on his way. And then we see Brian's iconic blue R34 GTR pulling into the driveway, and we know that Brian's there to join the barbecue. It's a great way to include his character without needing to spend money on expensive CGI or use archive footage. But surely, they can't keep teasing his appearances without giving us something in return, right? Besides, Fast 10 will be about Dante trying to rip apart Dom's family by any means necessary, and I'm sure he's going to set his sights on Mia sooner rather than later. Of course, Dom's going to come to her rescue, but it'd be really uncharacteristic of Brian not to show up to save the love of his life. So yeah, the idea of seeing him during the flashback sequence is great, but I hope Vin and director Louis Leterrier have a plan in mind on how they're going to tackle the other issue. Because the problem with bringing back a beloved character isn't that it'll be too expensive, it's that audiences might not like it at all. The reason why the Fast and Furious crew decided to use CGI in Fast 7 was to complete a movie that Paul would have wanted to see finished. And yeah, you could argue that he'd want the cast and crew to use his likeness as much as they need to, because at the end of the day, it's for the fans. Like, even his family's completely on board with the idea. So why would anyone dislike the idea of seeing Brian O'Connor back on the big screen again? Well, if Vin and Leterrier bring back Brian for Fast 10 and he gets hurt in any way, then it'd ruin the perfect ending Fast 7 built for him. You remember what it was like in 2015, right? Dom and Brian take one last ride together, and Dom bids farewell to not just Brian, but Paul Walker. It was an incredibly emotional conclusion to Brian's story, and it paid tribute to Walker in a beautiful way. And I bet there wasn't a single dry eye in theaters when See You Again began playing for the late actor. Most fans agree that this was the perfect way to end his character arc in the franchise, but Fast 9 brought him back, even if it was a tease. It told fans that Brian's very much alive in the franchise, and that he'll always be there to enjoy one of Dom's backyard barbecues. But what if Vin and Leterrier actually teased about his return in Fast 10? Quite a lot, actually. In an interview with Total Film, the director revealed that the movie will do a lot of jumping back and forth between the past and the present. So, no actual time travel then? Sorry, theorists. Looks like the whole Dom's gonna travel back in time to stop Dante theory isn't gonna work out. But anyway, Leterrier revealed an important piece of information in that interview, and it was that Brian's only going to be featured in the past. That's an interesting approach to the whole "how will they bring Brian back" question, because even if they use a digital double, it won't change his story much. But Vin, on the other hand, isn't too sure about saying goodbye to Paul's character in simple flashbacks. He didn't spoil anything for Fast 10, but he may have given fans a lot of hope for the 11th and final film in the franchise. He told Total Film that he couldn't imagine ending the Fast and Furious saga without saying goodbye to the iconic Brian O'Connor. And you're thinking what I'm thinking, right? If we take Vin and Leterrier at their words, then here's what's going to happen. Brian will only show up in flashbacks in Fast 10, and the movie won't show him in the present time because it's not required by the story. But he might show up during the climax of Fast 11, or if not the climax, then at least the final barbecue scene in the franchise. Everyone has their own theories about it at this point, but there's one that will really have you scratching your head. And it's that Dom's gonna be one of the main characters who dies in the grand finale, and Brian will end up taking his place at the head of the table. And that, in my opinion, is a great way to bring him back, as well as honor Paul's legacy. And I know, it's a very bittersweet ending, but I'd love to hear your version of how it should end down in the comments. Now, while it sounds like a great idea to bring him back into the thick of things, it could also turn out to be a huge risk. This goes back to what I said earlier about ruining Fast 7's perfect ending for the character. If they don't handle the CGI character correctly, or if they mess up his arc, then the audience will be outraged. And then it won't matter if both Vin and Paul's family support the idea of bringing Paul back using CGI and body doubles. It won't matter that dozens of artists worked hard to recreate Brian so he could be on screen for us to watch. The only thing fans will be thinking about is how the studio used their emotions for a character they love so much and then made money off them. So does not including Brian work better for the franchise? Well, no, not really. Like Vin said, it'd be weird if we didn't get to say goodbye to Brian O'Connor while we're saying farewell to all the other characters we've come to love. So how do you deal with that challenge? Well, there's the Brian takes Dom's place after he dies theory, but if that doesn't work for you, then there's another way, but you probably won't like it. Fast 11 could elect to only show Brian's side profile or the back of his head. If they never show his face and only show his back or side profile instead, then there would be no need to use extensive CGI or body doubles. I know, that idea sucks, but it's just one way of going about things. The other way is a lot more logical, and that's why I saved it for last. So imagine that we're approaching the climax of Fast 11. Things are more intense than they've ever been. Dante's winning, and nearly all of Dom's family, friends, and allies have either been locked up, killed, or worse, are being held hostage. With nowhere to go, Dom's about to give himself up, but he hears the familiar screech of an R-34 pulling up next to him. It's Brian, and he's come back to support his brother one last time. It'll be a small role, but with big consequences. And he won't be coming back just for Dom. He'll be returning for Mia and his son Jack. The perfect way for the franchise to say goodbye to him would be to showcase just how good of a husband and father he really is. He'll have grown a lot in the time we haven't seen him. And what better way to honor Paul Walker's legacy than to show Brian O'Connor as a happy man in love with his wife and son? So, from the challenge of honoring Paul's legacy as Brian O'Connor to the exciting possibility of his return in Fast 10 and Fast 11, that was everything you needed to know on how the franchise can bring Brian back into the fray.